I've said elsewhere that I think prayer is one of the most convicting topics in the Christian life. Just mentioning prayer, I think, convicts us because we all know the shortcomings and we all know the failures in regard to our prayer life. We know we don't pray as eloquently as we feel like we should. We know we don't pray as often as we should. We know that we're not praying as fervently as we should. We know that many times we've fallen asleep in the middle of our prayers, right? And many times our mind has wandered even as we've been praying. And so there's all of those convictions. And then you add to that what you just said, and that is that so often, even in my own life, I don't want to pray. It's just like my wife and I pray together regularly every night, and it's one of those things where I find myself leading up to the 10 o'clock hour when we usually spend a few 30, 45 minutes in prayer. I find myself just not wanting to, finding some other reason, some other excuse not to pray. Obviously, after we pray, I'm always blessed by it and always thankful that we did it. But it is one of those things that not only are we mindful of our failures and our shortcomings, it's just something within us that it rubs against the flesh. It rubs against what remains of the sin, sin remaining within us. Yeah.
It absolutely does. Yeah. We see that with Jesus' disciples in the garden and as one example, but so many times I think that's a very insightful way to put it. Tell me about your pastoral experience, particularly because this is a key feature early on in the book where you're discussing the effects of Hurricane Katrina, if I recall, and how that helped you to realize the importance and significance of prayer in a new way.
Yeah, the first when I finished I went right from my MDiv at RTS in Jackson to my PhD at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and then right from Scotland into pastoral ministry in Gulfport, Mississippi. They called me in May of 2005, and I was finishing up my PhD in Scotland. We were due to move to the area in late fall, October-ish or so of 2005, and as we all know, Hurricane Katrina came August 29th, and I was not yet there. We decided to go anyway, and it was actually kind of a perfect opportunity. Having lived in Scotland for 3 years, since we had been living there, all of our things were in storage. We had we had sold most everything we owned, sold our cars, sold everything we could sell, put everything else in storage, and so we had no bills, we had no cars, we had no expenses. It was a great time for me to be able to go in and basically camp out for a while after the hurricane because we had no electricity, we had nothing, and the church had been without a pastor for about a year when Hurricane Katrina hit, and so I felt the burden to go. I didn't need them to pay me. Didn't know if we were going to be able to have any money coming in. One of the first conversations I had with our the chairman of the Pulpit Search Committee that recommended me to the congregation as the pastor. He had lost his home. We lost the church, and probably 58 or 59 families in the church lost everything. And he had called me up right after the storm, and he said, "I lost my home. Most of the church is gone. Most of the people in the church have lost everything." Turned out to be about a third of the congregation that lost everything. But he said, "We can't pay you. You need to find another church." And I just remember thinking, "Oh no, that's not good." So anyway, we went into that kind of a situation. I went in. I lived with an elder and his family. I became his son, his second son, and I spent probably 3 months living with him until we could find accommodation and my family could join me. And we spent just time praying together, crying together, weeping just over what had happened in the Lord's providence. And as I say in the book, there is no class in seminary, at least none that I took, on how to lead a congregation in the wake of that kind of a natural disaster. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea where to start, and so I called the elders together and I said, "We need to fast and pray." And so we did. We fasted and prayed for about a month or so, and then we called the congregation to join us in fasting and prayer, and we did that as a congregation for probably 3 months or 4 months, and the Lord just led and guided through that. And I think every question the congregation had, or every question that the session had about fasting or about prayer and what prayer is and how should we pray and how often should we pray and all of those kinds of things, they came to me looking for answers. And so I had to do some digging and some teaching within the congregation. And so it really pushed me not only to pray, but it pushed me to really dig into what is prayer and why are we doing it, how should we do it, and all of those kinds of questions. And so in a real sense, a lot of what turned into this book, Persistent Prayer, came as a result of Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.